Holy cow, it's absolutely pouring today. I don't think there's any chance it's gonna be any type of sunlight or non-rain areas here anyways, in terms of flying the drone. And I guess today we'll find out what happened with the cell phone, well, hopefully anyways. And what did I read today? This first one is kind of interesting. It relates to that story, if you guys remember, where in Kingston, Ontario, the police were using drones to try to catch distracted drivers and ticket them afterwards. And there was a lot of controversy on whether or not being able to use a drone in this case is actually legal. And the argument from the police's end is how it's no different than, let's just say, if they're walking on the street or something like that, zooming in with a camera and taking pictures. Well, this was kind of interesting, as I guess apparently the police are going to have to face a potential lawsuit anyways in terms of privacy violations, where from what I gather in this, it seemed like they took pictures of, let's just say, the quote distracted drivers and they posted it online. But this one actually has a twist. This one here says, fight against police drone surveillance kicks off in Kingston. As it says here, the Canadian Constitution Foundation announced Monday that it is assisting an Ontario woman whose privacy was violated by the use of a high-powered drone. On May 7th, Mariama, whose last name is being withheld out of privacy concerns, was stopped at a red light in Kingston, Ontario, when she noticed a large drone hovering outside her car window. Mariama thought the drone operator might be committing a crime and was invading her privacy, so she pulled out her phone and took a photo. Minutes later, police pulled her over and issued a $500 ticket under Section 78.1A, the Highway Traffic Act, for using her phone while driving. Her license was suspended for 3 days. In total, she now faces nearly $900 in fines and fees and 3 demerit points if found guilty. Can you believe that, if that is true? So basically, she's driving along and then I guess she sees this drone. She thinks it's somebody else, and so she takes a picture of it as evidence. And then because of her doing that, the claim here is the police thought, well, there's my proof. You're using your phone while you're driving your car, so I'm gonna fine you. And it also says here, police later disclosed that the drone had been used to zoom in on drivers inside their vehicles, capturing close-up footage of hands, arms, and even phone screens as part of a distracted driving enforcement blitz. Images from the operation were later shared publicly on social media and distributed via press release. So their argument anyways is saying how these drones are recording people in an unreasonable way, which they say violates reasonable expectation of privacy protected by Section 8 by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I guess the argument there would be how people are on camera if they're in the public place pretty much everywhere, for example, security cameras and so forth. But what would you think in that case? Again, that's kind of an interesting twist if that is true anyways, where let's just say the person was driving perfectly legal and then they brought out the phone to take a picture of the drone because they thought it was someone else. And still on that topic of drones, this was kind of interesting. It relates to the company DJI, where they're not having a lot of luck in the US, where it seems like they're going to be banned, for example, from being able to sell their drone products. And recently they tried to fight this US classification of sort where they are a military company. And because of that, they have all these extra restrictions and so forth for their products. Well, I guess they lost their argument overall. So who knows? This doesn't sound good for them anyways, in terms of being in the US market for long. So apparently a US district judge named Paul Friedman ruled in favor of the Department of Defense, where it can uphold its designation of DJI as a, quote, Chinese military company under a 2021 national security law. And this denies DJI's bid to remove this from the controversial 2060H list. It seems like the court concluded that DJI qualified to be tied under this label because of, I guess, China's military civil fusion efforts, which includes government tech awards and dual-use drone tech, which has military applications. That's what the argument is anyways. And it says there's various evidence which they deemed as substantial, despite redactions and all that. So while they say there's proof of ownership links with China's military state investments, they say there's a lack of proof in terms of control, where they're specifically, for example, telling the company what to do on a day-to-day basis. So because of this, everything stays, and I suppose this bans the products from being used for things, for example, such as Department of Defense contracts and I guess usage and all that. So not surprisingly too, they're saying how this will obviously make people worried in terms of buying or using a DJI product in general, especially for businesses and organizations in the US, because again, this sounds like they're just being pushed out completely with no luck. If this sticks too, it makes you wonder, are companies like Autel next? I would imagine so anyways, based on this. And this was kind of interesting as it relates to that story about those ostriches in the BC farm, where it seems like the Canadian Food Inspection Agency wants to cull basically about 400 of them or so, but there's various legal issues right now where they're supposed to stop. However, it seems like they're still taking over the area. There's accusations that they're not taking care of the birds, they're injured and they're getting, I guess, dehydrated and so forth. And one interesting thing about this is how, as you guys remember, it seemed like those officials were trying to disable the live cameras and so forth. And you'd have to wonder why. People want to see what's going on, right? It seems like they set up this hay barrier of sort, and people were saying how it's been a fire hazard. Those animals aren't being well treated. And at the same time, again, if you don't have surveillance, how do you know what's going on? Are they trying to block people from being able to see, for example, their current operations and so forth? So with that, apparently some people were donating their equipment, and this one in particular was kind of interesting as there was a company that donated a hydraulic scissor lift. So I guess with a camera high up there, you'll definitely see everything if that's what they choose to do for the live streams and so forth. And as you guys know too, they restricted the airspace where you can't even fly things like drones. And now the general public, from what I'm seeing anyways, are wondering whether or not these regulations and power that the government has, for example, to restrict drones whenever they wish in these ways, like whether or not it's right. I mean, to me, it's a little weird anyways to restrict everything, trying to take down the cameras and so forth. It's like, what are you trying to hide? It does make me think of that funny example I brought up too, just in terms of safety. In some cases, you could, for example, just fly a drone up and inspect like the roof of the house or something like that. Like, it's so much safer. But because of all the restrictions in certain places, it's illegal. You have to go through so many hoops to actually do that, whereas I guess it's perfectly legal for you to climb up a ladder, stand there, I don't know, for the camera or something like that, even though that's more dangerous. Like, is this really about safety?
Yeah, it's not working well. I can give it to you now if you want. There's literally not having any luck. Also, I'm unable to get any parts for this phone until the past the long weekend.
Yeah.
If you want, I can give it to you back. If you can wait, maybe we can let you know by Wednesday or Thursday.
Well, the thing is, you just don't know what's wrong with it, right? Like, so
we know what's wrong with it. We just don't know how to fix it.
Okay.
We already know the phone doesn't work, so that's the problem. So we just want to find out what part needs to fix that problem. So in order to find out what part exactly needs, I have to change one by one, and I can't get parts until this, long weekend's gone.
Okay, and a little update about the phone. What's going on? Is it dead? Well, I went back in and unfortunately the person still doesn't know what's going on with it, and he suggested that I leave it for a bit longer again until like Thursday or so. I was actually confused because I thought this should be really simple for a shop, for example, to determine what's right and wrong, because even I mentioned before, I'd like to do stuff like this myself. I just don't have the tools to actually do it. And that's kind of what happened here from what I gathered, because he was telling me he needs to wait for the right parts and so forth, because he needs to try to test one by one with something that should work 100%, so he knows for sure what needs to be replaced. So that made sense now in that regards, why they couldn't quickly figure out what's wrong, because they didn't actually have the right parts per se, which I thought they would, again, because I would assume repair companies and so forth, they should have all this stuff in stock usually. I was basically saying if he thinks the estimate's going to be like, something like $500 or something like that, then there's no point. I might as well just take the phone back. But even he was stressing, no, like he said before, it'll never be that high. Even he doesn't think it's worth it. At most, he says it would be like maybe $150 or something like that to replace one little part or whatever, because from what he sees, there's nothing else that really needs replacing. Like the screen and so forth, they're all fine. He just doesn't know what that one little part is that needs fixing. And I said, if the phone could potentially be recovered in that way for, let's just say around that price, I could get everything back with the data and so forth, then okay, I might as well leave it again. I mean, so far it feels like he's being honest with me, so that's why I'm kind of just leaving it there anyways. Like, why not? So for now, I guess we'll wait until about Thursday or so to see what's going on. Yeah, welcome to Vancouver. Rain or shine, they're still gonna film it. And yeah, definitely no flying today, huh? Yesterday I was actually testing out the zoom feature on the Mini 5 Pro. You may have noticed there's this 2x zoom function. I just want to see how good it is, for example, in cases where you can't, for example, be too close to those quote advertised events and so forth. So maybe that gives you another way to try to get higher quality footage anyways. All right, see you guys later.